Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. A busy sports weekend has me all pumped up and ready to dish out some cheers and jeers on everything that's transpired and what's to come. As this is the JAYREELZ podcast with Joe JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And now that the weekend of the Division Series is in the books, and mind you, you have the American League with already 2 games under the belt, where the National League will pick up from where they left off on Saturday. And I have to start with the baseball, people, because it's that time of the year. We're trying to get through the hunt for Red October to try to get to a championship series as well as a World Series before we put a lid on the baseball season. So we have NFL, college football, plenty of time to talk about that. But baseball here, I'm going to start with the American League, because the National League, like I mentioned, they'll play later this evening, 6 o'clock down in Philadelphia between the Dodgers and Phillies, and then at 9:08 in Milwaukee between the Cubs and Brewers. And what you have to say about what had taken place in Toronto over the weekend is absolutely mind-boggling from so many different levels. Now, this Blue Jay team, who pretty much since the 4th of July, since that time, they have run the table, and although ended up in a flat-footed tie at the top of the AL East with the Yankees, but because they had the tiebreaker and them winning the season series over the Bombers, of course, they had the home field here to start us off. And boy, I tell you, that home field up in Toronto, where they've renovated the ballpark, a little bit of refurbishment, if you will. And not only that, but a fan base that has been waiting for a moment like this and waiting for a deep postseason run, which they have not seen in almost 10 years when they went to a championship series against the, at the time, Cleveland Indians. And for this Blue Jay team that have come out like gangbusters, that even with the 6-day layoff, where maybe you thought there was going to be some rust involved, considering that the Yankees already had a series under their belt, and although they had to come from behind in that wild card round against the Red Sox after losing game 1, and then, of course, on the ropes in game 2 before winning that, and then soundly winning a game 3. Well, guess what? They're in a similar predicament, the Yankees that is, where now they come back home to where they had that series against the Red Sox, winning 2 out of 3, and now they're going to have to fight to save their season come tomorrow at Yankee Stadium to see whether or not they're going to advance to a game 4 or they're going to be packing for Cancun. Because with the way the Blue Jays have come out here, I tell you, I'm not going to have any declarations to think, oh, this is the team to beat. I'm not going to come out and say, wow, 23 runs in 2 games, which we haven't seen in forever. I think the Yankees were the last team to do that against the, I believe it was the Indians again, or it was the Guardians at that time. Maybe it was the Indians in 2020 when they had those 2 big-time performances in Cleveland before they went out west when they lost to the Tampa Bay Rays in the Division Series. But as it is right now, with Vladimir Guerrero looking at the Yankee blue and gray and their vintage road uniforms, knowing that it's almost like a bull charging a matador, where Guerrero, you know, he takes it personal when it comes to playing against the Yankees. And man, as he mashed here in these first 2 games. And let's face it, game 1 got away late from the Yankees. They had a great opportunity there in the first game after Guerrero gets the home run and then Alejandro Kirk. And then it was a situation where the Yankees had cut it to 2-1 there in the 6th inning and had just a chance to blow the game open with the middle of the lineup there after Aaron Judge, as I go through the sequence there, bases loaded, 1 out, where Bellinger walks in a run, and then you had Ben Rice and Giancarlo Stanton come up where you think that either one of those 2 guys could wreck the game, and you had Rice pop out, and you had Stanton strike out. So that was going to be it for the Yankees at that point, where you felt as if the tide was going to turn there, where the Yankees were going to either tie the game or even take the lead. And then you had the uprising in the 7th and 8th innings where the Blue Jays scored 4 in each frame, and therefore the game became a blowout. And for whatever the reason, that translated into game number 2 to where Ernie Clement hit the 2-run homer there in the bottom of the 2nd, and then the wheels fell off from Max Fried to Will Warren, and before you know it, it was 2-0, 5-0, 9-0, 11-0. I mean, it was just out of hand quickly, which was punctuated by the grand slam by Vladimir Guerrero, which turned the game from 5-0 to 9-0. And in the immortal words of Warner Wolf, turn your sets off there. And the Blue Jays have had 2 rocking chair type games. Maybe not so much game 1. Obviously, the rocking chair in effect after the 7th inning when they made it 6-1. But all you can say right now is this Blue Jay team, they look like they're going to be tough to stop. Now, it could turn quickly considering that the scene will shift to the Bronx. And now that Carlos Rodon, for a second straight time, is going to have to save the Yankee season just like he did last Wednesday. And he was on the ropes there in that game number 2, which we talked about there on Thursday's podcast. But now he's going to have to save the Yankees' bacon here to live to see another day. And is he going to be up for it? I mean, I would think. But these Blue Jay bats, I would have to imagine that they're going to cool off at some point, and they're going to have to cool off as soon as Tuesday, for that matter, if you're a Yankee fan, if you want to get back in the series. Now, quickly with the Blue Jays, listen, we can look at these 2 games, and obviously their bats are not red hot, they're white hot. How far could this continue? Can we see another game where, not to say they're going to win in the teens or they're going to put up 10 runs in their sleep, but I think if they get off to a fast start there tomorrow, then all bets are off. The Yankees are going to probably go quietly into the night and into the offseason, where if the Toronto lineup continues to put pressure on that Yankee rotation, and in particular with their patience at the plate, they like to put the ball in play. And if we see a little bit more of that, right, not that they have to jump out to a 5-0 lead or anything that we saw yesterday, but if they're going to really come out fast, maybe put up a 2-spot early, and then maybe another couple runs in the 3rd, and then the Yankees are scuffling and trying too hard and squeezing the bat too tight, then forget it. So we all know that the Yankees have to play from in front tomorrow night, and sizable. If they're up 1-0, 2-0, okay, fine. But you would think that they want to get off to one of those crooked number type, 3-0 in the 1st, and then maybe 5-0 after 2, in order to put the Blue Jays at bay, to realize that they, at least for one night, could be put on the back burner and maybe not get off to the sudden start that they did yesterday, and then obviously picked up from where they left off in game 1. But the Blue Jays, they are hot as a pistol. Yankees, let's see what they could do as far as trying to get back in the series. And I think you'd be surprised. I said this Thursday, where I thought the Yankees would win in 4. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But I don't think the series is over. Spending time with my father-in-law yesterday, he's like, it's over, there's no shot, blah, blah, blah. Listen, if the Yankees take care of home field, then they go back to Toronto for game 5, and that is a toss-up. Despite the fact that Toronto has now won, think about it, 8 of 9 games north of the border against the Yankees in that building. So yes, does it bode well for the Yankees if they do push it to a game 5? Absolutely not. But we all know, all the pressure will be on Toronto to win that series, where now they have no pressure. They don't have any pressure until maybe the later innings on Wednesday night if they're trailing, knowing that they do not want to go back to Toronto, despite the fact the home field and everything I discussed, that plays in their favor. But how I look at it is that with the way they're playing, I think they're going to close the series. I think they'll win one of the next 2. But I would not be surprised if there is a game Friday night in Toronto. I will say that. I won't. And what could I see from this Yankee team that is going to give me any hope or any indication that they're going to get back into the series? Well, they have to have better starting pitching, because if they don't, it will be over in 3. And do I trust Carlos Rodon? If you've listened to this podcast over the years, I do not. But he has had a good year, and he did hang in there despite the fact that he left tied and had first and second and nobody out before Fernando Cruz bailed him out in the 7th inning of game 2 against the Red Sox. So, yeah, it's not looking good. And I'm not saying this to be a reverse jinx or to think that there is any hope, but you know what? Hey, somehow, some way, all it takes is a bounce of a ball. All it takes is just a big home run. And Aaron Judge, who has hit in this postseason, although not prodigiously. You haven't seen the power numbers. You've seen a lot of singles and a double here and there, but you have not seen the bomb that could come maybe as early as game one there in the bottom of the first inning if you get a runner on, and then next thing you know, he hits one to deep right center or deep into the left field bleachers, and who knows, maybe the Yankees will wake from their slumber, not necessarily offensively, because how I look at it too, we could say that the Yankees made it respectable, 13-7 as opposed to getting blown out 13-2, but to me that was against the Blue Jay bullpen. And that was a shame for John Schneider to pull that kid, Trey Yesavage, however you pronounce his name, to pull him out, pitching a no-hitter. And I get he's not going to go the distance, so you would have figured he would have given up a hit along the way. And mind you, that splitter was unhittable. They were flailing at it, that pitch to the Yankee batters. And because of his delivery coming over the top, that is so hard to pick up. And for Yesavage, what a performance. No hits, 5 1/3, only 78 pitches. Could he at least pitch the sixth inning? And then if you want to put the bullpen in the seventh, have at it. But to me, and of course, the Toronto fans were booing, and I didn't understand why. That was just inexplicable, if you ask me. And the manager knew it. He said in the postgame how, yeah, I'm going to get booed. I'm going to be the most unpopular man in Toronto. But for whatever the reason, again, the analytics didn't want to have a situation where he was going to implode. But the kid only had, a 12-0 lead? I mean, seriously. So that move made absolutely no sense. And it gave the Yankees maybe a little bit of confidence coming into Yankee Stadium, knowing that the score, although 13-7, maybe in an NFL score it's respectable, but not for a baseball score. But anyway, he had a masterful performance, 11 strikeouts, 1 walk, did not give up a hit. Told Cam Schlittler, hey, here's my beer. Hold on to my Molson. So that's what you have there for the first 2 games. We'll see what happens there come tomorrow night. And then in the other series last night, you had the Tigers this close from going up 2-0 back to Detroit. But even with Tarek Skubal, who did pitch well, I understand he had a couple of mistakes there, which had the Tigers down 2-0 in the 8th inning, but then they came back with 2 runs, and you thought to yourself, not for nothing, but the Tigers have actually played pretty well in this postseason. And I understand the game got away from them in Game 2 against the Guardians, but considering how Game 1 turned out, and then, of course, Game number 3, how they pulled away late. Game 1, I mean, what could you say about what they did as far as winning in extras, getting the big hit, and that you could argue whether or not that Dan Wilson should have put Zach McKinstry on first to pitch to Javi Baez. With a reliever, you have a righty on righty, and Baez, as we all know, is a free swinger. But he decided to pitch to McKinstry. He gets the base hit there, which the Tigers then take the lead in the 11th, and they end up winning the game. But then yesterday, they could not get any heroics, despite the fact that they tied the game. But Julio Rodriguez, who had a home run earlier in the contest, gets the double down the line as the Mariners save face and go to Detroit tied at 1. And with the pitching matchups, now, Logan Gilbert will pitch tomorrow against Jack Flaherty, which I was a little surprised. I thought maybe they'd pitch Casey Mize in Game 3, but they'll have Mize going in Game 4, and right now it's undecided as to who's going to pitch for Seattle in Game 4. But you would think that a split could be in order. Now, I'm sure the Tigers, they want to put all the pressure on Seattle. And I think if the series is going to be intriguing, the Tigers have to win Game 3 because we want to see the Mariners under now more pressure. Granted, they lost Game 1, and here it was when the game was tied, whether or not they were going to shrink, and they did not. And if the Tigers win Game 3, now the pressure is going to be all in Seattle to try to bail themselves out to get back to the Pacific Northwest for a deciding Game 5. That's what you want to see in this postseason. That's where you get the drama. If Seattle wins Game 3, I understand the pressure's on Detroit. They have it in their building at home. But you want to see the team that had the bye, the team that now on the road to see what they're made of. Yes, we can see what the Tigers are made of, but the game is at home, where you would think behind their home crowd and the friendly confines that they would find a way to win that game. Is it automatic? Absolutely not. But you want to see the team on the road with that type of pressure. And we'll have to wait and see whether or not that the Mariners will be able to I won't say bounce back, but able to get themselves in a position to where they could go up 2-1 and not have to feel that pressure, whereas the Tigers, they want to do whatever it takes to try to close the series out in Detroit before a possible Game 5, and last thing they want to do is get on a plane and go back to Seattle. So that's what you have there. And yes, I know I didn't mention anything about Max Fried. I know he got blitzed, 7 runs in 3+ innings, 8 hits. Terrible job by Max Fried. I mean, do I even need to expound upon that? The guy you paid $282 million? Yes. But anyway, that was that for the American League. Now, as far as the National League goes, the Brewers. I understand it's one game, and even though the leadoff home run there by Michael Busch made you think, Cubs may come out firing. All right, let's see what happens here. Bottom of the first. And boy, did the wheels fall off. Now, Jackson Chourio is the one guy that you would hope to have in a lineup, but now the hamstring has cropped up. So who knows what's going to happen here throughout the remainder of this series, whether he's going to be available, whether he's going to come back, or even perform in the postseason at all if the Brewers do survive against the Cubs here in the Division Series. But when you put up a 6 spot after the leadoff homer, and you're playing from uphill the rest of the way, I mean, what more is there to discuss? And the Brewers, as I've stated, I do not believe in. They're a regular season team in my eyes. And the Cubs, who had to have, I don't want to say go tooth and nail, but they were able to outlast the Padres in the wild card round. And now that the Brewers, even with the layoff, they showed no rust. As I mentioned, when you put up a 6 spot bottom 1 and then pretty much cruise to a 9-3 victory, I mean, what more can you what more can you say in regards to that? And when Matthew Boyd doesn't even get out of the first inning, 2/3 of an inning, and is on top of, what did he go, 4 1/3 before he got pulled with 58 pitches in Game 1 against the Padres, you know that Craig Counsell, the former Brewer manager, they're going to want to do anything and everything it takes to either boo him out of the building or get their team just out of the postseason quick, fast, in a hurry. And the big story now is going to be Chourio, whether or not he's going to give it a go at any point throughout the rest of, whether it be this series if it goes deep or the following series if they win this one. So, and then they play tonight. How I look at it is that the Brewers are a team that I think they're going to want to silence the critics and the naysayers, but they can do that in this round. I want to see it in a championship series, whether it is against the Phillies or Dodgers and beyond. Because playing a wild card against, even though they're the rivals that are 90 minutes down the interstate, but people expect the Brewers to win this series. It's the following one, and certainly the final one, are what people like yours truly are dubious about. And all I'll say is, I'm sure they'll take care of business. They may go up 2-0 tonight. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see your pitching matchups for the game. And it's just the National League games tonight. Of course, the American League has the night off. Aaron Ashby against Shota Imanaga. So the Cubs, if they're going to win this series, and I get it that the series will go back to Chicago even if they're down 0-2, and obviously you're going to have to hold serve on home field, but I would think if you're a Cub fan, if you have any chance of winning the series, you have to win tonight. I mean, that's all there is to it. And as far as the other series goes, the Dodgers, I tell you, that team looks like they are going to be tough to beat. And one game does not make a series, as we know. But when the Phillies had a 3-0 lead, early there, was it second inning, got the 3 runs, or third inning? And not to say Ohtani was on the ropes there, but obviously he was scuffling a bit. And then he righted the ship, pitched very well there from that point out. And then in the 6th inning, when the Dodgers had 2 on with Kike Hernandez coming up, and something told me when he got up to the plate there, and I said to myself, this guy is a winning player. We've seen him come up with clutch hits and clutch at-bats throughout his postseason career. Is he a guy that's going to scare you when you, on game day, when you look at the lineup and you say, all right, yeah, Ohtani, Betts, Freeman, and you see Kike Hernandez, all right, yeah, he's there. But what Kike Hernandez is, he's like the gnat that's flying in your face. As much as you could swat him out and say, oh, get out of here, whatever, he always comes back. And he may not deliver all the time. He may not be one of the big clutch players of our generation. But boy, when you least expect it, that's when he delivers. And what did he do? He got the Dodgers back in the series with that double down the line. And funny enough, as much as I discussed, and you can even go back to last year in some of those podcasts and check those receipts, that guy could play on my team any day of the week. And what's great about him is that he plays multiple positions. So he's not just glued to one spot in the infield. He can play the outfield, obviously any position in the infield. That guy's a winning player, and I wonder if David Stearns is watching, because maybe you could look to him to sign him to bring some more, not only just credibility, but more experience and testicular fortitude to your team, which obviously we did not see on the Met team during that final series in Miami. So I digress. But with that, cutting the lead to 3-2, and then Teoscar with the big home run there in the top of the seventh. And even though the Phillies had a big-time threat, bases loaded, where Tyler Glasnow was on fumes, and they brought in Anthony Vesia to go up against Edmundo Sosa, and he flew out to deep center, and that killed the Philly rally, and the Dodgers were able to prevail and win Game 1 5-3, which Game 2 tonight. And to me, this is a must win for the Phillies. Can they come back and win 3 straight? They can. They have a very good lineup, as you know. Their rotation is solid. Maybe not spectacular, especially without Zach Wheeler there. But I will say this. The Dodgers, that team knows how to win. It's obvious. They're the defending champs. But they're not going to be scared. They're not going to be intimidated by that Philly crowd. If anything, that Philly crowd was actually quiet, even after the hit by Kike Hernandez, because they knew that this team, who has faltered in a World Series, when they were up 2-1, if you recall, in 2022, and then they got no hit, combined no hitter by the Astros. And then they lost a Game 5 in their building before losing in Game 6 in Houston. And then when they were up 3-2 in the championship series to the Diamondbacks, and all they had to do was win one game against an Arizona team that had good starting pitching, but a lineup that wasn't going to scare you. And what happened? The pitching locked them down. Their offense went to sleep, the Phillies that is, and the Arizona Diamondbacks won the National League pennant in Citizens Bank. And then last year, where the Mets, Game 1, Zach Wheeler's dealing, and then a 5-run eighth, where the Mets just stole and shocked the Phillies to win a Game 1. And then even with their comeback, down 4-2, where Mark Vientos hits the 2-run homer in the 9th inning before the Phillies prevailed there. And that crowd's going to get tight again. And I'm sure they're going to be pumped up, ready to go, and clicking on all cylinders. But if Blake Snell, who is capable of shutting down an offense, and if he's able to keep them off balance, the Philly lineup, that crowd is going to be silent. And I'd be afraid, if I'm a Philly fan, whether or not you're going to get out of Citizens Bank with a win there, let alone a Division Series win. That's why it is a must game. They have to get this game tonight. And yeah, they have the capability to come back to Philadelphia, but what are the chances? You think the Dodgers up 2-0 with their pedigree, you think they're going to want to give the Phillies any type of oxygen, any type or signs of life to get back in the series? And I understand Philly went to Dodger Stadium 3 weeks ago and beat them 2 out of 3, including the first 2 games of that series. But that was 3 weeks ago. That is not today. And if the Dodgers go up 2-0, they're going to do whatever it takes to close out that series. If not in 3, but certainly in 4. But we'll have to wait and see. Looking forward to the games tonight. You have Jesus Luzardo towing the rubber for the Phillies, where Blake Snell, as I mentioned, he'll be the pitcher for the Dodgers tonight. Now, your schedule for the rest of the week, you're going to have the National League play Tuesday, where you'll have the Dodgers, Phillies, Brewers, and Cubs. They're going to have a day off. It's a travel day, so it's weird with the schedule. That happened last year with the American League, where you had American League Saturday, day off Sunday, American League Monday, and then another day off. So the NL Division Series will have a day off again tomorrow. So you'll have the American League pick up where they left off yesterday. Only 2 games tomorrow, where one more time you'll have Seattle at Detroit at 4:08, and then the Yankees hosting Toronto at 8:08. And then Wednesday, you'll have the full slate of games. Seattle, Detroit at 3. Milwaukee, Chicago at 5. Toronto at New York at 7. Philly at LA, 9. And that's all at the 08. So 3:08, 5:08, etc. And then we'll be back on the podcast Thursday to recap everything that's happened. And then you only have the 2 games on Thursday, where if there is a Game 5 in both of those series, they'll be played on Friday, or one of the two series, whatever it may be. And then you already had a hire as far as a manager goes in baseball, and I mentioned this about Skip Schumacher, someone who's going to gobble him up quickly. The Rangers, they brought him in to be interviewed, and I'm sure they locked him in a conference room somewhere and made sure they got their big pens out and printed up all the documents to make sure that he signed on the dotted line. Now, the terms were undisclosed, but he signed a 4-year contract to be the manager of the Rangers. I think a very good hire. Schumacher, who had been a major league player, most notably with the St. Louis Cardinals, but then managed in Miami for 2 years. The 1 year they went to the playoffs, which was 2023, and then for whatever reason, in 2024, gave him the heave-ho. For what reason, I don't know. And they brought in Clayton McCullough, who actually the Marlins had a pretty good year in their own right, despite the fact that they were 4 games under 500. But that's almost a winning season if you're a Marlin fan, which is sad to say, but it's true. So Schumacher resurfaces there in the Lone Star State to run the Rangers. And that's it for the baseball. Now let me turn my attention as I put on the helmet and shoulder pads to the NFL. And the big story of yesterday, by far, there are no more unbeaten teams. So if you've heard the champagne pop, I would say around 11:30 last night, that was Larry Zonka. That was, geez, I got to see who's left, because unfortunately we had a few passings here with the 72 Dolphins, whether it was Mercury Morris, Jim Kick. We know Don Shula dearly departed. We know Nick Bonacani dearly departed. We know, Bob Greasy. Bob Greasy's still around. I'm sure somewhere the still living Dolphins of that 72 team were popping the champagne to know that there will not be a team that will run the table to go undefeated. As we all know, the 72 Dolphins, the only undefeated team in NFL history. But not only were the Bills the final team, but you also had the Eagles in 2 shockers. And I'll go to the first game where Denver was in Philadelphia, where the Eagles had a 17-3 lead. And you thought, all right, well, Denver, as I mentioned on Thursday, how if Denver hung in the game, and let's say they lost a close one. Let's say it was 21-17 Philly. All right. No moral victories, but they were able to go on the road, obviously against the defending Super Bowl champs, and play well, and at least had that little feather in the cap to know that, all right, the defense is real, and the Broncos not only are a team that you would think is still going to make some noise there in the AFC, maybe even the AFC West for that matter, considering now the Chargers lost yesterday to the Commanders, and the Chargers have the head-to-head as of right now, considering they beat Denver already out in LA a few weeks back. But that's a good litmus test for a Bronco team. Well, they passed with flying colors, because even with that 17-3 lead, they came all the way back. They took the lead, and actually on a very, I would say not risky, but for them to go for 2 there in the fourth quarter, where they could have tied the game. But Sean Payton said, the hell with it. We're going to try to go out and win this game. And they got the 2-point conversion to take an 18-17 lead. Then they tacked on a field goal to make it 21-17. And with no timeouts left and with about 1:10 left to go on the clock, that Philly offense, they cannot stretch the field. Yeah, they'll have their moments where they have a guy downfield open. They could throw a bomb, Devontae Smith, etc. Maybe even A.J. Brown for that matter. But their passing offense is very weak. And I understand Jalen Hurts, he can't break a pane of glass. He's not the type that's going to throw rockets all over the field. Everything's going to be dink and dunk, and everything's going to be whatever the defense gives them. And listen, that's not a knock on their team, because they had their offense orchestrated in a way where they're going to be able to get their chunks. And this is without Saquon Barkley having a big year. Yesterday in the game, a very paltry sum, and he has not broken 100 yet this year. And we're talking about Saquon Barkley, who got over 2,000 yards last year, and combined with the postseason, had the most yards ever on the ground. So for the Eagles, even though going into the game 4-0, and everybody's thinking that with a 17-3 lead, they're going to be 5-0, but Barkley only had 30 yards there. And mind you that the Eagles led most of the way. It's not as if that they trailed and had to come back, where they had to just abandon the run game and just strictly pass. But if you're Nick Sirianni, and Hurts numbers were decent, I mean, 23 for 38, 2 touchdowns, but when you're only putting up 17 points, you're going to have to put up more. And I understand the Bronco defense is good, but still, they have to do a lot better in the passing game, and they have weapons too. It's not as if they don't have stars. So I don't know. Sirianni has to do something to get that passing game intact, because for whatever the reason, it's not cutting it. Just isn't. And when you're an Eagle defense that when you give up 18 points in the fourth quarter, that's something that you also have to look back and say, wait a minute. The Broncos, we understand that they have a young quarterback and one good receiver, Cortland Sutton, and pretty much nothing else. And for them to come back the way they did, and not only that, take the lead on the 2-point conversion. And I tell you, that is a fantastic win by the Broncos, no matter how you slice it. And if you're the Eagles, the sky's not falling. You're not going to go crazy. You don't like that you had a 2-touchdown lead and you lost at home in the fourth quarter. But unfortunately, you're going to have a game like that. What you don't want to happen is that becomes a pattern. And that obviously we'll have to wait and see as the weeks go on. But more of a better win for Denver. And that is a bad loss for Philly, no matter how you slice it. But to me, when you look at it from the periphery, that is a bigger and better win for them than it is a bad loss for Philly. Because Philly's going to be fine unless this starts a tailspin of some sort. But for Denver, you talk about sky-high confidence, etc., enormous win. And the same can be said for the New England Patriots. And when you really think about it, the Pats, they should be 4-1 because of the 5 turnover game that they had against Pittsburgh, and both of those turnovers were inside the 5-yard line against the Steelers, where they should have gotten 2 touchdowns. But as you know, they lost that game, and I picked them as an under at 8.5. So who knows? Even after the bad loss against Las Vegas, and then what was that other loss to make them 1-2? I'll have to pull up their schedule. It'll come to me. Yeah, it'll come to me. Right now, I can't recall who they lost to in that second game. But now they've done well to where they're 3-2, and or at least it was a foregone conclusion that the Bills are going to win the AFC East. And now that's not going to be the case because they have a 1-game lead, technically a half-game lead ahead of the New England Patriots, considering what they did yesterday. And big game for Stephon Diggs in his return to Buffalo, 146 yards receiving, which was big time. And Drake May, considering that coming into his second year, a lot of people thought, he had a good end to his year last year, and he's had a pretty good year so far to start. So everything is looking up and looking rosy in New England right now, to where they are just a game behind, or you want to say technically a half game, considering with the tiebreaker. But that was a huge win. And I didn't really watch that game. I was more locked up in the baseball. At that point, I could care less. I thought Buffalo was going to win, even though I saw 20-10 at one point. I said, oh, geez, they are going to upset the Bills here. But then when they tied them, I thought to myself, all right, well, now all's right in the world, before they got the game-winning field goal as time expired, or close to it. It was close to the end of the game. So give it up. Those are 2 big wins there by teams that we thought were not going to have a shot in hell to win on the road. So kudos to them. And then on the flip side of that, you had 3 teams that came in winless. You had New Orleans, who beat the Giants there yesterday. And I know the Giant fan can't be happy. I know no Malik Neighbors, but Jackson Dart, not a good game. 2 interceptions, had a big fumble. And Dart, from the week before, beating the Chargers, certainly not the same recipe that I'm sure he was hoping for there down by the Bayou, as the Saints get off the schneid and win their first game. So Jackson Dart obviously got a taste of the NFL there against a team that was winless. And I know it doesn't look good, especially if you're the coach, Brian Daboll. You thought you'd be a little bit more competitive in the game. Now, I understand it was 16-14 at the half, but for the Saints to win 26-14 and obviously the Giants not to do anything offensively in the second half, that's a little puzzling, a little bit. Because it wasn't against the Eagles, it wasn't against a divisional foe, or a team that was a little bit more superior than you. It was a team that hasn't won until yesterday. So that was one that would certainly be a little perturbing and maybe even disturbing if you're a Giant fan, and certainly the head coach for that matter. And the same can be said for the Arizona Cardinals, because that was a game that they absolutely had zero business losing. The Tennessee Titans, growing pains with Cam Ward at quarterback, and down 21-12, fourth quarter, to where the Titans, Ward scrambled out left, throws a pass, picked off, and you're thinking, oh, well, that's going to be it for Tennessee. No surprise there. And then what happens? The quarterback fumbled the ball. And next thing you know, it's getting kicked around. It's in the end zone, and it's recovered for a touchdown by the Tennessee Titans. And this was on the heels of another boneheaded play. What's with these guys? Amari DeMarco or DeMarcado? Can you get into the end zone? How about getting to the back of the end zone before dropping the ball? How many players have done that over the years? Whether it was Deshaun Jackson, he did that many years ago in a Monday night game in Dallas. That's the first time that you really got to see something like that. But why is it that these players who are running for long touchdowns, and he had a 70-yard touchdown in his back pocket before inexplicably dropping the ball before he crosses the goal line to secure a touchdown? Therefore, touchback, Titans get the ball. I mean, it's just, well, what are we doing here? That touchdown would have sealed the game. And as it was, what did they have? A 21-3 lead before they came back. And then when they got that touchdown at 21-12, it cut it to 21-19. And then the Cardinals couldn't run out the clock. They get a first down, but then they couldn't convert. And what happens? The Titans get the ball, and not only did they have a short field, they had to go 71 yards for the game-winning field goal, but 11 plays. All of a sudden, you thought Steve McNair was that quarterback there. Terrible job by the Cardinals. I mean, how could they even blow a game like that is beyond me. But the Titans get their first win. And there's now one team that was looking to get their first win of the year. They were playing at home yesterday against a team that, they're nicked up at wide receiver. And yes, they're coming off of a tie. And the Dallas Cowboys come to town. And what do? They just ring up the Jets, 37-22. Score was closer than it was indicated. Dak Prescott's 4 touchdowns. Big one to George Pickens that really sealed the deal for the game. I mean, the game was already out of reach. What was it, 30-14 at the time, I believe, when they got that touchdown. But that just added the cherry on top. And the New York Jets, behind first-year coach Aaron Glenn. And listen, I'm sure he wouldn't trade his position for no one, considering he's coming back home to the team that drafted him. But with the Lions at 4-1 and then beating the Bengals the way they did over Cincinnati, and not really much to unpack there, as the Lions pretty much coasted to victory there in the Queen City. But I'm sure he probably has maybe an ear or an eye for his former team. Maybe, just maybe thinking, just an inkling of him thinking, damn, what if I was back in Detroit right now? I'm sure he's not thinking that, but it's always fun to have a little just thought about what if he was still in Detroit and knowing that this Jet team is struggling. And I hated that they're wearing all these stupid uniforms. I know the Bills had the whiteout uniform last night. Well, how did that work for them? If they had the vintage blue on, where they normally wear that at home, not to say they would have won, but at least that's Buffalo's uniform. And the Jets wearing all black. Oh, God, I just hate. And the Cardinals, too, yesterday with the black helmet. Stop it. We understand that it's marketing. We understand that you get to sell more jerseys, whatever. I hate those uniforms. Oh, they're just an eyesore. Can you just wear the regular uniforms? And if you're the Jets, can I say this? And you can check these receipts going back to last year. And I know 2 years ago they had a whole rebrand and they went back to the old Jet logo with the green helmets and the Jets with the J, that Jet icon. They have to go back to the old uniforms. The green and white with the stripes on the side, the old Joe Namath uniforms, where they went back, I believe it was after the 97 season in 98, where they had the old Jet helmet, the white with the green logo, with the Jet logo and the green. Go back to that, Jets. Why are you trying to be cute here? I mean, deplorable. And Justin Fields did not have a bad game, but when you're trailing from behind, as big as they were, of course your numbers are going to be inflated like Fields' numbers were. But the Jets, the last remaining winless team in the league, and hopefully they get a win soon. So we'll see what happens there. But as far as the rest of the league goes, you had the 4 byes: Atlanta, Chicago, Green Bay, and Pittsburgh. So don't have to worry about that. Mac Jones, what was that Thursday night? A renaissance of sorts? Which just goes to show you that even I could suit up and go under center for the Niners and probably put up a pretty decent performance because it's the system. It's not the quarterback. Big time performance. They came from behind. They had to win in overtime. The Rams had to come from behind. And for the Mac Jones led with Brock Purdy out, San Francisco 49ers, they win 26-23. And you understand why they had to go for it there on fourth down. They weren't going to kick a field goal there to tie, although they were deep in Niner territory. But please, that was the last thing that Sean McVay was going to do. He figured that, let me give it to my running back. He got stuffed. Those are the breaks. There isn't anything you say or do when it comes to that. And for the Niners, now riding high, leading the division. They had division wins over the Cardinals, Rams, and Seahawks. And right now, looking like possibly the team to beat there in the NFC, considering that the Eagles lost yesterday as detailed to the Denver Broncos. Now, and that was the Thursday night game. I know that kind of gets lost in the shuffle because of yesterday, etc. But that was an enormous win, big time there by the Niners. Now, as far as the rest of the schedule goes, do I even need to get into the Vegas Raiders and the Colts? Colts blow them out 40-6. Nothing to discuss. If I trim more fat here, which I could do rather quickly. Houston beating Baltimore. Now, you have no Lamar Jackson. You have no Ronnie Stanley. You have no Kyle Hamilton. You have no Nnamdi Matabuke. I mean, their team is literally a mash unit. So, I hate to give the Ravens any excuses, but 44-10, I understand that is a beatdown. I understand that's going to look good on the win ledger for the Texans, but that does come with a caveat. Because when you don't have the quarterback and Cooper Rush threw 3 interceptions, terrible afternoon for him, that's why the score is going to be as lopsided as it was. Then you have Carolina beating Miami. And I know Miami, weren't they up 17-0 in this game? I mean, how did they lose this game? Is beyond me. And I know Rico Dowdle, 206 yards on the ground. Monster game for him, but that is just a terrible performance there for the Dolphins, who had Tyreek Hill out, as you saw there on Monday night, as he shredded his knee. He's done for the year. Sad there because the Dolphins maybe looked like they could have gotten on a roll with Tyreek back. And come on, even without him, they were up 17-0 against the Panthers and ended up losing. So that's a bad job by Miami there. And let's see, other games of note. Let me go to that. Yeah, I said Detroit and Cincinnati. There's nothing really to unpack there. To me, the Lions took care of what they had to do. In fact, at one point, they were up 28-3 in the game, and that was going into the fourth quarter, so that game cosmetically looked a lot better than it should. But as far as the bigger games of note, as I scroll here, how about Tampa winning in Seattle? Big win there, and I know that was up against the baseball because you had the Division Series right across the street from where the Seahawks play, but a mano-a-mano battle between Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield, combining for over 700 passing yards in the game. But the Buccaneers, who prevailed, they were up 13-0 early, and then it was just back and forth from there on out. Now, going into the fourth quarter, the Buccaneers did have a 7-point lead, and even when the Seahawks took the lead there with about, 3.5 minutes to go, you thought to yourself, all right, well, they have plenty of time left on the clock, and therefore, knowing that you had a scenario where even when you leave time on the clock, for Mayfield to could go down the field to tie the game, which he did, and then shortly thereafter, let me just double check this because I did not watch this game. I wasn't following this closely, but you had the interception there by Levante David, which shifted the field position and then set up the game-winning field goal for the Buccaneers. So that is an excruciating loss for Seattle. Obviously, they do not keep pace with the 49ers there in the division, knowing that they lost to them earlier this year. So that is a brutal loss and just a phenomenal win for the Buccaneers. Now 4-1, 3-0 away from Raymond James Stadium. And yeah, you can't get a better win than that if you're the Buccaneers. So kudos to them and what they did there at the Pacific Northwest. Then you had Jaden Daniels come back from injury. They're down 10-0 early to the Chargers. And after that, that's when they flicked the switch. Next thing you know, they went past the Chargers standing still as they scored 27 unanswered points. And Jaden Daniels, 231 yards. Maybe not as efficient as you'd like in the air, but still did what they had to do in order for them to turn it around and get themselves a victory, and a big one at that, considering that the Eagles lost, so they're now that much more closer to the top of the NFC East with that win. And then the Chargers started off 3-0, typical Charger fashion. Surprising start, all right, great, and then they lose the next two. To the Giants, and to the Commanders. And if there is any silver lining in those two losses, is that they're to the other conference. So they're still 3-0 in the AFC, obviously 3-0 in the division. So even though they've come back to the pack, and now that with the Chiefs playing in Jacksonville tonight, they can actually tie them. But thankfully, with them beating the Chiefs in Sao Paulo in week number 1, they'll have the tiebreaker. Now, with Denver there, they also have the tiebreaker against them. Here I am talking about tiebreakers in week 5. But this is why when you lose these type of games, but to the other conference, they don't sting as much. Now, losses are losses, I get it. But if you are going to lose, and this is the old prevailing thought, that when you have a hotly contested division, or you have a situation where you're playing against good teams and you have to deal with tiebreakers down the road, especially when it comes to conference records, the scenario regarding losing games to the other conference is what you want. Now, we understand they're going to lose games in the conference at some point. They're not going to run the table in the AFC. But, again, not a bad loss. Don't get me wrong. But that's one that you will definitely take, knowing that you have a leg up on the division with the tiebreaker scenario. And lucky for them with the way the schedule broke, that they played in the first 3 weeks against their division opponents and obviously accumulated that 3-0 start. And then you have, let me see, I think there's another game I haven't got to here. Yeah, New England, Buffalo, Washington, Detroit, Cincinnati, Tampa, Tennessee, Houston, Carolina. No, that's pretty much it. I've got, the game in London, where the Vikings had to scratch, claw, bite, just to win that game. They got the touchdown there late with about 25 seconds to go to beat the Browns. And the Browns are feisty. Dylan Gabriel actually played pretty well in the game. His first start. And for Gabriel, a lot of people were wondering whether or not he's going to play on this level. Now, again, he threw 33 passes, which is probably a little bit too much than what the Browns and Kevin Stefanski wanted. But again, held his own, played very well, threw a couple of touchdowns, but they were unable to get the win to leave London with a victory. And as we know, the week before, the Vikings were in Ireland, so they had their 2-week stay out in Europe where they got a split against teams from the AFC North, but that was one they had to have there yesterday, and they were able to get that win out in, it was in Tottenham Hotspur, not Wembley, as they win 21-17, and what was a good game. Now, I didn't watch it just based on what I read and saw highlights and stuff. That's what I gather. And that is your NFL. Tonight, Kansas City, Jacksonville will wrap it up, as you well know. Now, one thing I want to get to, which was shocking, and I don't know, this story is still going on. I have to bring this up because this is one of the bizarro stories you could hear. Did you hear about this incident regarding Mark Sanchez? Friday night in Indianapolis, where he's there for Fox to cover the game, and who knows what his status is going to be as far as being employed by the network. But he got involved with a truck driver in a loading dock. Now, I don't know if this was a hotel. I don't know if this was just some building. But Sanchez must have had a night out, got a little intoxicated, confronted this truck driver for whatever the reason, and then they get into a scuffle to where the truck driver, who was 69 years of age, and Sanchez was, I believe, 38, to where the truck driver felt like his life was being threatened, pulled out a knife, stabbed Sanchez a couple of times, was taken to a hospital to be treated, and I believe he's in stable condition. But now here's where it gets even bizarre. He is under arrest for not only being, I guess, disorderly conduct, I don't know what the charges were, but that threatening to kill a man, and here he was, he got stabbed in the process. This is a story you can't even make up. And who knows what's going to happen with Sanchez moving down the road. I know Fox had put out a statement. They're aware. They're getting all the information, yada, yada. But I don't know. Does he even have a job here? Now, I understand this was something that happened, obviously not while he was on the air. And I know that there's still details trickling. I mean, this was one that, again, you can't even wrap your head around. I know I can't. And when you hear about him getting stabbed, you think, oh, geez, did he get mugged? Was he confronted by the people, blah, blah, blah. But no. Decided to pick on some 69-year-old man and gets into this little scuffle. Next thing you know, he gets stabbed and he's in a hospital. And then I'm sure as he was laying on a hospital bed, he probably said, Mr. Sanchez, you're under arrest. What? I tell you, just a wild story. And I'm sure as the days and maybe weeks unfold, we'll get a better understanding as to how this is going to come about or whether he gets terminated by Fox. Who knows? But yeah, that is just a weird story to say the least. All right, now let me get to the college football because it was not a great week. And I understand Vandy hung in there against Alabama, was tied at the half before they took over, and Vandy was unable to score another point the rest of the way. So, all right, give them credit. No moral victories, but still, they didn't get embarrassed. Now, the teams that got embarrassed were Penn State and Texas. More so Penn State because they play at UCLA, and that was just a flat-out abomination. They got beat from pillar to post, a team that was ranked 2 in the nation in the preseason polls, and with the loss to Oregon the week before, and with the inexplicable loss to UCLA, not only do they have 2 losses on their ledger, not only do they fall out of the top 10 and top 12 or even 15, if you want to encapsulate the 15, the teams maybe on the outside looking in. I understand the selection committee has to decide whether or not the teams that are outside of the 12 somehow, some way get in. But they're not even in the top 25. And I'll get back to Penn State in a minute because the same can be said for Texas, losing at Florida and Arch Manning. Again, very uneven year for him. And yeah, he could blow out the Lafayette, Louisiana, Monroes, and he could blow out all the bad teams, the Ball States of the world. That is just, I can't even fathom not only what's happening there at Happy Valley, but for the Longhorns. Everybody thought Arch Manning was going to be in the running for a Heisman Trophy. And I understand Florida is still Florida, but they have been not playing well here recently. You know, they got beat by Miami a couple weeks back and certainly have not played well, despite the fact that they got the 2 wins to start off their year. But still, that was just mind-bogglingly bad to know that Texas, number 1 coming into the year, and Penn State coming in as number 2. And now they're not even in the top 25. Which now, I'm going to say this right out. And I know Texas, they play in the SEC, so you know they have tough games down the road. One more loss, they're going to be toast. And Penn State, they still have to go to Ohio State, and they play Indiana, which I'm not sold on with Indiana. But they got to go play at Columbus. So they're going to get 3 losses. And after this, I mean, how do you even recover from this if you're Penn State? But they're not going to make it the playoff. They're not. I can say that right now. And it's not going out on a limb by any means. But even if they're on the table. Now, wait. I take that back. If Penn State runs the table, that means beating Ohio State and they don't lose again along the way, the selection committee will find a way to get them in. So that I can understand. But this team, as we know, does not beat top-ranked teams. And even teams that are in their own conference. We just saw what happened with Oregon, Ohio State last year. So yeah, I have no faith in Penn State. And right now, you talk about a school and a team that their confidence is borderline shot right now. Again, getting whacked by UCLA, no offense, but they had the quarterback, I can't pronounce his name, I'm terrible. Nico, again, I'm going to stop right there. My apologies to Nico. But when he puts up 5 touchdowns in a game against Penn State, and their quote-unquote vaunted defense, and not to say they're vaunted, but a lot of people look at that defense as one of the top caliber defenses in the country. You wouldn't have known by what you saw there on Saturday. And Texas, I don't want to hear from them anymore, and Arch Manning and all that. Who knows if he's going to be anything close to his uncles. Forget about Peyton, maybe even Eli for that matter. And again, he's a young kid, I understand, but still not what the doctor ordered or anything close to what the Longhorn fan was going to expect there down in Texas to see the Longhorns and what they've done. Just deplorable. Nothing else that you can even discuss when it comes to that, and they're not going to make it to the playoffs. And then Miami beat Florida State. I understand the score was a lot closer than indicated. It was at 28-22, and they were up 28-3 going into the fourth quarter. Although they had to hang on there, but still, the Seminoles were no match for the Hurricanes. So the Hurricanes now catapult themselves to number 2 in the nation behind Ohio State as I pull up the rankings here. So with that being said, you have Ohio State, Miami, Oregon, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, followed by Oklahoma, Indiana, Alabama, Texas Tech, Georgia, and then LSU, Tennessee, Georgia Tech, Missouri, Michigan, now at 15, as they beat Wisconsin. That rounds it out, and we'll take a look at the schedule on Thursday's podcast and see how Week 7 already in college football will unfold. All right, guys, I got to kick it in high gear here because we're getting close to the hour poll. I don't want to make this any longer than it is, but yeah. Time is ticking, so let's get right at it. Now, I want to go to the NHL before I get to the basketball and then a quick UFC point. The NHL season begins tomorrow. Now, I'm not going to put out a podcast for it. I'm going to put out a video. It'll be on my YouTube channel. So, at JAYREELZ YouTube, if you want to get my 2025-2026 NHL preview. So, you've been warned. But as far as the over on the point totals for the year, I'm just going to roll through them, and I'll talk about them, on the video podcast, which will be, again, released tomorrow. As the season will begin, you have the 3 games. You have Blackhawks at Panthers at 5, and they're reeling right now. And I'm going to get to the Panthers in a little bit because something happened there Saturday night, which, oh my God, it was a sight to behold. But Blackhawks, Panthers, Penguins, Rangers, and the nightcap tomorrow night. Let me pull that up because off the top of my head, I do not know your NHL schedule for opening night tomorrow. And of course, the Panthers will raise their second banner in a row to the rafters. But you have Colorado at LA at 10:30. So 5 o'clock, Chicago, Florida, 8 o'clock, Pittsburgh, New York, and 10:30, Colorado at LA. So for the over-under totals, pulling those up. Yeah, I'm just going to run the list. I'm not going to predict them. I'll predict them on tomorrow's podcast or video pod. I have to say video podcast because it's not going to be on Apple or Spotify. It's going to be strictly on the YouTube channel. Anaheim, 84.5. And Anaheim just signed a defenseman to a, 8 years, $72 million deal, Jackson Lacombe. So keep that in mind. 84.5. Boston, 80.5. Buffalo, 85.5. Calgary, 82.5. Carolina, 105.5. And I'm looking at these for the first time. Chicago, 67.5. Oof, Connor Bedard. Yeah, they didn't do much to refortify their team. Colorado, 103.5. Columbus, 85.5. Dallas, 103.5. Detroit, 84.5. Edmonton, 103.5. Florida, 105.5. That could be an under. I think they were slightly under that last year, if I'm not mistaken. LA, 98.5. Minnesota, who just signed Philip Gustafson, their goalie, 5 for 34, I believe. 95.5. Montreal, 90.5. Nashville, 86.5. The Devils, 99.5. Islanders, 83.5. Yeah. Rangers, 95.5. Ottawa, 95.5. Philadelphia, 84.5. Pittsburgh, 78.5. San Jose, 70.5. Seattle, 78.5. St. Louis, 92.5. Tampa, 102.5. Toronto, 99.5. Utah, 92.5. Vancouver, 90.5. Vegas, 104.5. Washington, 96.5. And then Winnipeg, 97.5. Yeah, I'll unpack it tomorrow. I may have 1 or 2 in there that I like, but besides that, it's going to be tough because a lot of them are pretty much at that number or anywhere near. A couple points higher, a couple points lower. So I'm going to have to roll up my sleeves, do my homework to see where we stand as far as that goes with the season beginning tomorrow. And Saturday night, you had some old-time hockey, which I loved. Did you see that? First period, going at it, where they had, what was the kid's Sabourin? I don't know if that's the son of Ken Sabourin, the former defenseman. I gotta look that up. Hold on one second. But for the Lightning, and that was about a minute into the game. Scott Sabourin is his name. Let me see if he's related to Ken Sabourin. Hang on. Early life. Now, I'm not going to pull that up. I'm going to just continue here. A minute into the game, he goes after one of the Panther players and just starts beating him. Pretty much just dropped his gloves, started going at it. Other player wasn't expecting it. And then you saw that throughout the rest of the night. And I haven't heard any statements from the NHL, which I'm a little bit surprised at, because I'm sure they're looking at it. It's an exhibition game. Nobody's paying attention. Nobody cares, blah, blah, blah. But I care. And even though... No, I don't see that here. All right, Lightning Panthers had 312 penalty minutes in preseason game. But yes, 65 penalties, 312 minutes. I thought it was 318. And I used to love those box scores that it would look like a long CVS receipt of text just detailing everything that had happened throughout the course of the game when it comes to penalties. And I'll say this real quick. Now, as great as it was to see that, and I saw a lot of scrums and misconducts, game misconducts, etc., but even with that, it is a far cry from what it once was. Why, you may say, or ask? Because the tough guys that fought back then are far from how they're built today. There's only a handful of guys that are built to scrap, that are built to fight. And teams back then, you had 2 and 3 tough guys on every team. So today, you barely have one. And I'm talking about bona fide heavyweight or bona fide lightweight. Because a lot of these guys, they don't get involved in scraps like that. Which is a shame, and that's a podcast for another day. But just to see all these scrums and the Donnybrooks, granted that it wasn't anything close to what you saw 30, 40 years ago, but still, when that happens, I get a rise out of that. I love it because I love the physicality, the tough nature of sports, and even asking, what message are you sending in the final preseason game, blah, blah, blah. And even the coach, John Cooper, said, I'm surprised that hasn't happened earlier, which just goes to show you how bad rivalries and how bad the NHL is in response to having any spark, having any physicality, toughness, etc. What are you going to do? Those are the breaks. And I see that the Bruins are going to retire number 33 in honor of Zdeno Chara at some point this year. Let's pull that up real quick. Why not? So the ex-captain Chara, it is going to be January 15th prior to the game against the Seattle Kraken. And then WNBA, real quick, the Aces are up 2-0 on their series against Phoenix. They go now but they go to Phoenix to see if they could hold home court or hold serve on that. So although I think the Aces are going to win probably in 5, could be a sweep, who knows. But this is the Aces championship to lose. So we'll keep an eye on that. And then the fallout from this scenario regarding the WNBA commissioner, Cathy Englebert, and Napheesa Collier, the Minnesota Lynx player, it's even stranger by the day because they were supposed to have a conversation, supposed to meet up, maybe a luncheon or talk about it over a meal. And then Collier decided last minute, I'm going to cancel. You had Engelbert, the commissioner, come out to say that she was disheartened by the comments and also the support by the players in light of what Collier said. And what Collier did say in the big picture was that we had the worst leadership in sports, hence the commissioner. And even though she was disheartened by it, but she claimed that she never said that, you should get on your knees and bow down to how grateful you have it and how the league with the new media rights deal, etc., that it could have been worse. And I guess her being too big for her britches with her ego, and even though she admitted that she probably should have scaled it back a little bit, that she wants to do better, but at the same time, the league is thriving, it's good, it's this, it's that. We don't need to have a situation where the commissioner is going to have to do anything drastic. But you got to wonder whether or not is she on the hot seat here? Are the other owners commiserating to see whether or not that this is going to be a firestorm? I guess because it's toward the end of the year, and even though some people like yours truly is paying attention, but not to the extent where maybe she deserves to get her walking papers. I mean, it's very dicey. It's very sticky. I didn't like the angle that Engelbert took, even if she has denied it. But by her saying that she has to be better, I'm sure there is some culpability on her part to say like, yeah, thankfully nothing else came out than what it was, but maybe whether it was, I won't go as far as saying berating other players, but maybe having discussions with other players that were rather spirited, and maybe she said, well, hey, this is how it's going to be, fine, or you know what, tough, or you know what, you got to deal with it, whatever, where she should have been at least handled that with a little bit more aplomb and a little bit more, dare I say, compassion. I may be a little bit strong, but that's what you have there with her comments. Now, who knows if they are going to reconnect at some point. The meeting was supposed to take place at some point this week, but that got squashed. So you got to wonder whether or not the commissioner felt a little bit of guilt there. Not only just with this scenario, but maybe if something else is going to come along down the lines as far as dirt or any other rumors pertaining to players of the league. I guess we'll have to wait and see as time goes on. But for those who follow the sport, you have a finals that's going to pick up, I believe, tomorrow night, and then Friday before the weekend if the Mercury do get that far. And then lastly, as I get off the hardwood and get into the octagon, I know you had a rematch where Alex Pereira went up against Magomed you know me with names, people. Ankalaev. That's what it is. And all Pereira did was have him submit 80 seconds in. Was on top of him, blows, elbows, you name it. And Pereira, who wasn't himself when he first lost to Ankalaev, I think this was last March, or this past March. So for Ankalaev, who certainly didn't have the game plan that he had the first time around, and Pereira wanted to get that championship back, certainly had a lot of fire in his eyes and a lot of also deep in his gut. Just 80 seconds in, was able to have him tap out, and he is now the light heavyweight champion there of the UFC 320 just this past weekend. I know I didn't preview it going back to Thursday's podcast. I should have done better than that because we know Pereira is a big figure in the sport. Maybe not so much Ankalaev, but still, that was one where a lot of fans, I'm sure, could have tuned in, watched, followed, etc. Despite the lack of awareness on my part, my apologies once again, but you did have that bout, and it was a rather quick one. So if you blinked and you missed the official or the referee just waving his arms and giving the championship belt back to Mr. Pereira, then you need to stay glued to your seat. Make sure you don't have a drink. Make sure you don't have to go to the bathroom, because in last night or 2 nights ago's case, that was the fate of Mr. Ankalaev. And if you blink twice, you probably missed it. So that'll do it, my good people. Another episode in the books. Thank you so much for passing by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the wonderful world of sports. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, review, throw me a few stars, write a review on Apple, Spotify, the channel at JAYREELZ. Please, I implore you to do so, people. Actually had a podcast pregame earlier this morning, which 3 more subscribers hopped on board. The little engine that is this podcast, that is this channel, that is this endeavor. So please, if you could go ahead and do so, I would gratefully and sincerely appreciate it. And if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, or suggestion, you could do so at the following: on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast, or JAYREELZ on Instagram. Twitter, JAYREELZ1, just the number. And then the old-fashioned way, the JAYREELZ Podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals. Because whether you do or do not know, there's what I love to do, people. In the blood and the DNA since day one. And if you haven't heard so from the start or somewhere in the middle, even toward the end of this podcast, then shame on you. No, I'm kidding. You have to come back. And hopefully you'll come back the week after that, and the week after that, and the week after that, because I have content for days coming forth. Some sports history lessons when it comes to baseball in October, among other types of content, despite the podcast that you're watching here today, because I'm going nowhere as long as I'm alive and breathing. And I got news for you. As long as I'm sitting in front of this camera and this microphone, I promise I will deliver nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby.